Hi, my name's Ross Green and this is my retrospective. So let's get straight into it. So throughout this video I'm going to be explaining the two films I was lucky enough to work on this year, which was Box Box and Mallow. Both these films were huge fun to be a part of. On Box Box I was director and animator, and on Mallow I was an editor and animator again. So I'm going to be comparing these two, explaining my process, explaining my part on both of these, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's go into it. So let's start with the movie Box Box. In the summer of 2020, me and Jordan Carls came up with an idea for Box Box. The idea was to take two boxers like Mike Tyson and Tyson Fury and put them into robot bodies. These are two fighters with different techniques, different styles, and we wanted to see what it would be like if these two warriors came together to have a brawl.
So the brief for Box Box was to combine live action footage with animation. We had to use live action plates and animation from ourselves, and we only had one day to film everything.
So we started designing the characters and we started to come up with ideas for stories, and these were the first iterations of our robot designs. Now, as I'm sure you agree, these aren't fantastic. They were stand-ins just so we could kind of get an idea of what we kind of wanted them to look like, how we wanted their personalities to shine through. We were able to get a character designer called Ryan Wood to join us, and he created these character designs. Now, as I'm sure you would agree, these are fantastic. And with Tyson Fury and his one, you can really start to see the king, the Gypsy King in that character come out. However, as we started developing the story more, we started to realise we don't really want to do a story about Mike Tyson and Tyson Fury fighting. We wanted to go actually away from that. We wanted these characters to become their own things. So we started coming up with names for them, which was Plastic Mike and Chromium King. Both these were so much fun to design and make, and we were really excited to pitch. We were lucky enough for Box Box to get picked to be made into a film. This was a huge honour for us. So we started planning out the storyboards, planning out what the actual story was, how could we get from A to B, why would they be fighting? And what we kind of came up with was they needed something to fight over, which was a belt. This was going to be a MacGuffin for the film. It was going to really help to push why the boxers were fighting and why they needed to fight. Our goal for Box Box was not to win awards at this stage, but it was to make a really technical and really awesome film, which we would be proud of. We really wanted, as boxing fans, to really come across as films like Rocky and Creed, films that really paid homage to the boxing community, which is what me and Jordan both love. We love boxing. Now, when it came to shoot day, it was a lot of fun, but also very stressful. We had only 7 hours to film everything, and this was very hard to do because the room that we were in was very small and very compact, and we didn't have a lot of room to move around and to get as many of the camera shots as we wanted. So we had to use those new camera angles to tell the story. Now, one of the things I wanted to make sure we did on Box Box was get the boxing right. So what I did was I took all the animators on a boxing course. I'm a boxer myself, so what we did was we got on Zoom and we started doing some boxing classes with each other. And now all we're going to do for the first punch is this, like that. Yeah, exactly, so come in. Just the basics, a jab, a hook, a power punch, all these little things, all these little tools and devices in boxing, just so when the animators were animating, they could think about it in their heads. And also when they film reference for themselves, they got that back knowledge in their head. So when it came to finding reference for my shots, I took a look at Tyson Fury. How did he move? What jabs did he throw? What hooks did he throw? I also looked at Deontay Wilder footage for myself. I also filmed myself doing some of the punches for even better reference, to even better understand where's the power coming from, where's the movement coming from, how are my legs performing, all these different things. So then I moved into blocking. So when it came to blocking, we finally came across our first issue, which was, how on earth does a toy box? It sounds quite a simple question, but it's actually quite hard because a lot of toys move in different ways. You know, for example, the original Box Box, their arm only moved like this. They only had one ball joint, which means if you're going to throw a punch, it's going to come like that, which realistically wouldn't create much power. And so this was a real issue. And so we spoke to Jordan, who was our rigger, and we were lucky enough, started to learn a lot more about toy anatomy. How do toys move? Is there a toy that can basically box? and we came across this Batman toy, and what we found out was that there was a joint right below the shoulder, and it would allow the arm to twist in and out, kind of acting as a ball joint. And what would happen is, as we would punch, it would allow us to now rotate the arm. It would help us to look like it had more power coming from it. This really helped with the movement of the arms and really helped to convey the strength that came from these boxes. Here was my first blocking. So as I started blocking, I came across my first issue, which was there was no power in the shot. Let me explain. When I was blocking, I was thinking a lot about the arm movement, a lot about where the arm should be placed, and what type of punches to throw in and how to make those punches look realistic towards the camera. And I wasn't thinking enough about where the power is coming from in those shots. So I started to look more into boxing and started to watch more of my reference, and I started to realise that a lot of the power comes from your waist. And it's kind of like this offset effect where it comes from your waist, then into your torso, then into your chest, and finishing with the arms. Whereas I feel like right now in my shots, I'm just using the arms, which means there's no power. Whereas with my full body, when I twist, you can just tell there's a lot of power in there. When I moved into spline, I realised Plastic Mike's fall doesn't really feel that realistic. I started to think why it didn't feel realistic, and that's because there was no bounce on him. And one thing I learned very early on from bouncing ball is every single thing bounces when it falls. It's just a natural thing that happens. Again, it depends on the weight of the object, but most things have some sort of bounce to them. So I started watching more references, and as I started watching more KOs in boxing, I realised all the boxers bounce backwards. It feels very realistic and feels very much what an actual knockout would look like. So then this was my final shot on box spots. Now, although I was done with animation, I still had my directing responsibilities to look after. And we came across a big issue, which was our renders came out late. It meant the 2D department wasn't ready in time to start producing their comps. Now, what I would say if we were to do it again was, we would start producing renders very early on in the pipeline, even with blocking animation, even with no animation, and just stand-in poses, or just T-poses, just so we can get that process of rendering out quickly, and just so we kind of tested out the pipeline. Because if we did this, we wouldn't have had such a crunch to get all the work done, and we wouldn't have to be so worried about the deadline.
The team dynamics on BoxBots were great, however, when things were delivered late, like 3D delivering the renders late to 2D, it really stressed people out, and it really made an uncomfortable and awkward environment to be in. And this is something which we need to improve on for next time, to make sure that our deadlines are really being met and making sure we're getting people off jobs if they're not delivering quick enough.
With BoxBots, I learned a lesson of being more patient. I need to be more patient when I listen to my team. I need to be more patient when I hear feedback. I need to just slow down quite a bit and just look at the bigger picture. A lot of times on BoxBots, I got a bit ahead of myself and I tried to be a little bit too ambitious. I think some of that sometimes put some of my teammates on edge, and also I really do apologise to all of them. And I think these are some things which a lot of amateur filmmakers tend to do. And I think there's only something I can grow on in the future to get better and better and better at.
During the making of BoxBots, we all worked remotely, which was really hard because it was quite hard to find out when everyone was around, if everyone was okay to come to meetings. So what we did to combat this was we made sure we had a meeting every other day, and this just made sure that we were all in the loop, deadlines were being met, and made sure no one felt too nervous about the upcoming deadlines. Also, we used Shotgun to organise ourselves. On Shotgun, we were able to upload our shots and change our shots if we needed to. And if anyone was missing, we would just go to Shotgun to find their work.
Overall, BoxBots in my opinion was a success. Now, let's move on to talk about Mallow.
The brief for Mallow was to create a film using a real-time renderer, such as Unreal.
Now on Mallow, I was an animator and editor, which was a slightly less stressful job than it was on BoxBots. I was really allowed to exaggerate my poses, make sure I was pushing them as far as possible. It was a really cartoony feel that I wanted to go for with the film. whereas Boxbots was way more body mechanics, way more mechanical. So working at Mallow was really a chance for me to really allow to show off my posing skills and what I was able to do as an animator in that cartoony realm. So on Mallow, I was lucky enough to be given the scream sequence. Really wanted to work on a shot that made the audience laugh, and this sequence did exactly that. So when it came to first blocking my shots, I was a little bit rusty because I didn't really have an idea of where I really wanted to go. Yes, I filmed reference, but I hadn't really ever done real cartoony or exaggerated poses before. So you can see here, I was a little bit stiff. None of them really felt too pushed, and I actually felt a bit weak, the sequence. So when I got a bit of inspiration from actually Looney Tunes and Scooby-Doo, these are some of my favourite cartoons growing up, and they really helped to give me reference for what the movement should be, when the kids are hugging, how do they hug, what's the speed of that hug. Using some of these old-fashioned 2D cartoons where it really could push the posing, where it really could push their bodies to the limit and really show that type of comedy in screaming, and really helped to give me some sort of understanding of where I wanted these screaming scenes to go. All these different things really helped me to find a way to animate this. But I really want to take a look at shot 150. So shot 150 was probably the biggest challenge of the Screams because it was 3 characters I had to animate. It was Mallow, Neil and Tina. Now these characters were really hard because they were all screaming at the same time, but I all had to make them stand out in different ways. Well, Mallow is an alien, so he's not used to standing on 2 feet, so maybe he falls on his butt. So because he's fallen on his butt, he's hurt, so now he can scream. And because he can now scream, the kids scream, and it's kind of a knock-on effect. So with Mallow, I looked at Stitch quite a lot.
How?
Because it was a real good reference for a little alien who was quite annoying, but also really cute. And I was also challenged, how would I make Mallow look cute and scary at the same time? And I really feel like I achieved that because he kind of leans back, then comes into a ball. And these kind of shapes, or you go from a real sharp angle into a ball, which is quite a smooth angle, you're quite soft to quite sharp. And this really helps to give the audience some idea of one moment he's quite angry, but one moment he's quite calm. And that's something I really focused on with Mallow. Now with the kids, Neil was quite a nervous wreck and quite a panicky character, quite like Shaggy in Scooby-Doo. So what I wanted to do was, I made sure his arms flailed up and made sure he had a really nice line of action. By having his arms flail up, it really helped to show how scared he was. Then I looked into Tina. Now Tina was a great character to animate because she's quite petite, but she's also very headstrong. She's very excited, very up for adventure. However, leaning all the way forward, and what this does, it shows her intrigue. Yes, she's still screaming in the shot, but because she's leaning more towards it, I feel like it's more showing to the audience that she's inviting the character in. And these are little things I'm now trying to think about when animating. I'm trying to think, how does my shot help progress the story or help tell the story to the audience in some way? So with my animated shots done, it was time to move on to the edit. With the edit, they wanted something quite smooth because this is for kids, kind of like a CBeebies shows, and that's what I used for reference. I used Kawada Brothers, and that also used a stop motion kind of style. And I really liked how they used no hard cuts. Each shot led onto another shot, really slow, really nicely paced, and there was nothing really abrupt about it. One of the biggest challenges I had whilst editing this project was keeping up with all the files. I was doing an edit every single week from the animatic all the way to the final project. And with that, as you can imagine, there was a lot of files. It even came with different frame rates. So what I did to combat this, I started a new project. I started organising everything. And this just meant I could just keep on top of all my files. And this really helped during the final process because if I needed a specific sound, I know what folder to go in, and because it was all labelled correctly, it was just really easy to find. This is a skill I'm 100% going to take into future projects and to future edits, because now I know it's easier to just put things in different places. Yes, it might take more time at the end of the day, but it would be so much more worth it, because it means I don't have to scavenge around and really work hard to find that specific shot or that specific sound.
On Mallow, we decided to choose a real-time renderer, which was Unreal. Unreal worked wonders. It was fantastic to get the footage so fast. The team dynamics on Mallow were great. I hadn't really worked with a lot of these people before, and this really allowed me to get to meet them, get to know their skill set, get to learn who they are as animators and creators. From what I could tell, no one was lacking on their part. However, there might be some things in the works which I didn't know, which they might have kept from me, so I didn't stress, which in that case I do really appreciate them as well, because maybe if I knew if someone was slacking, it would kind of stress me out. Communication on Mallow was actually really perfect. I only had a meeting probably once a week. I had to do an edit every week, but it didn't feel too overbearing. I was quite de-stressed, and it felt like our producer Nicole knew what was going on, and I had complete faith in her that we weren't going to be left behind, and we weren't, and it felt really great to have that knowledge of her support there.
Now let's compare the two films together. Now BoxBots used a VFX pipeline, which meant we also used Arnold rendering, which means renders came out slower, which means they got to the compositors slower, which means the compositors got it to the editor slower, which meant overall the film just became really slow and became a really slow process. Yes, some of this was because of our lack of planning beforehand, but also it just became a really slow and tedious process. Whereas on Mallow, when we finished our shots, we can just get them instantly with the real-time renderer. And it meant me as the editor, I was able just to get out and edit really quickly. Overall, BoxBots appeals to more of a boys demographic, definitely action-packed, whereas Mallow, I see it more for CBeebies, more for kids. Mallow I preferred animation-wise, because I really enjoyed working on exaggerated poses. I really enjoyed learning a lot about that cartoony side of animation, which I hadn't really thought of before Mallow. Whereas on BoxBots, it was very stiff still, it was very mechanical, it was a lot to do with body motion. And although it was great learning that, I had a better time really pushing my posing on Mallow. The only issues I really have with Mallow is, I don't think the on-twos works. If we look at the animation overall between both films, BoxBots feels a lot more continuous. Each shot flows on from each other very nicely, and it's all animated within the same kind of style. Whereas Mallow, this on-twos feel which we wanted to go for, which was quite a stop motion vibe, some animators did do it, some animators didn't do it, so overall it just kind of feels a bit messy. Apart from that, I think Mallow looks fantastic. The set design looks fantastic, the sound design looks great, the plasticine feel looks fantastic, and it just looks really, really nicely made. Overall, I couldn't say which one I preferred to work on, because I love both these films, and I was proud to work on both of them, and I learned a lot from both of them. So if I was to compare BoxBots to any mainstream film, it would have to be Real Steel. Now, Real Steel was directed by Sean Levy in 2011. So I really wanted to compare the BoxBots fight sequences to the Real Steel fight sequences. So let's take a look. So whilst watching this, I've done a little bit more research on Real Steel and how they animated it. And it turns out they used motion capture to get the realistic effect of these robot boxers. Now, obviously because of that, they're going to get a more realistic boxing feel to the film, which is why their boxing animation, boxing robots look way more realistic than BoxBots. However, while saying that, what we've achieved is pretty similar. We've been able to make punches and with that feel very kinetic, and they feel they have a lot of power behind them. We've also been able to demonstrate that these knockouts feel real. You can feel the power behind them. The main thing I can learn from Real Steel is the camera angles really. That the camera angles go really in tight to them, actually go inside the ring. And by putting them inside the ring, the audience kind of feels you're in the ring with these robots. And I really wish we would have done that in BoxBots, because by maybe having the camera in the ring, We could have got more interesting angles. So when comparing Mallow to another film, I compare it to Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch was made in 2002 by Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois. Where these two films differ is their side characters. There's a lot more depth into Lilo and her family and what she considers family, and that makes sense to why she wants Stitch in her life, why she wants a friend in her life, because she has no friends. Whereas in Mallow, that story isn't as well thought out. There's no reason to why they really want Mallow in their lives, why they really want to have a creature or a friend.
Both films were great, however I do think Lilo and Stitch has an edge on Mallow because they have a better story, the characters are more interesting and have better arcs, and also I think because of their 2D style they're able to really push what Stitch can do, and there's no real limit to how angry or how far he can go.
But I definitely think Mallow stands its ground for having a really nice character arc, and also the style of Mallow and the look of Mallow is really cute, and I think that really will appeal to the same audience as Stitch, which is kids. Both films had their highs and lows, but both films came out fantastic in the end, and I'm really proud of the results they have. Just look at the awards we're getting already. I'm really impressed with what me and my team have been able to achieve and the amazing talent we've been able to produce on screen. I've learned a lot about being a director, an editor, and most importantly an animator. Overall, thank you so much for listening to me. I've been Ross Green, I'm living the dream.